Number 5. Quinlan Voss. Now, Quinlan Voss is probably one of the most badass characters to come out of the Star Wars EU probably ever. With Quinlan Voss, this dude, it's almost the same way with Kyle Katarn, except with Quinlan, this dude did follow the dark side and kind of stayed there for a bit. He could almost count as a dark Jedi in some counts, but he always kept finding a way to bounce back. But still, he was very against, a lot of the Jedi's old codes, and, fought against them. He came from a race of people who were very traditional. This guy was a rebel through and through. But it always seemed to him that the Jedi Order was just so conforming to him, and that's probably one of the many reasons why we saw Anakin, turn to the dark side as well. But with Quinlan, this dude was more of a tracker. He was almost like the Wolverine of the Star Wars universe in some cases. This guy was more of a let's fight and ask questions never, and if you get in my way or ask questions about me about it, I'm gonna gut you with my lightsaber. Sadly, that got, trashed by, Clone Wars by making him some kind of surfer dude. Good job, Dave Filoni, for fucking that up. You had one job, Dave, one job. And that's kind of why he was such a very, a character you could gravitate towards, because, again, the dark side is so easy to fall into and so powerful, but at the same time, he had to find a way to bounce back, and even at the end of the Clone Wars, when he escaped Order 66, at least in the original canon, he escaped Darth Vader, he managed to find a new path in his life of becoming a father. And that's what I liked about him, was that, despite everything, this was a dude who still found the light within the darkness, and even used the darkness to his advantage. So you can't help but love Quinlan Voss for those grounds. This was a guy who was willing to, again, kind of like with Kit Fisto and several other Jedi on here, was that this was a guy who was willing to get things done. But however, he was more okay with, doing the bad. And he was also the guy the Jedi went to carry out things they could not. So yeah, again, he was quintessentially the Wolverine of the Jedi Order. But yeah, anyway, so moving on. Number 4. Yoda. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be surprised that Yoda's, not like number 1 or something like that or higher. Yoda is, of course we all know Yoda from the original trilogy, the man who helped train, Luke Skywalker into the Jedi he would one day become. Yoda was Yoda, as he always says, size matters not, for your ally is the Force. And you can't help but deny how badass that speech he had when he was trying to get, Luke to connect with the Force was. Yoda, as much as I didn't care much for Yoda with a lightsaber, I really don't, I couldn't help but think that, this was a guy who was so powerful, and so in tune with the Force, he could just, snap his fingers and kill you. But that's what I liked about Yoda, was that, here was this little green elf, and yet he was the most powerful Jedi, to exist at the time. I mean, yeah, there were more powerful Jedi in the Old Republic, but yeah, this was a Jedi who learned to use his powers to his own extent, and, used more, his knowledge was the better tool. His knowledge was, his prime weapon. The Force was there too, but his great knowledge over 800 years of training in Jedi and, studying the Force. This was a guy, here was someone who was willing, to use his mind over matter. He's the living definition of that when you think about it. Yoda is the living definition of mind over matter, and you can't help but think how cool that is when you really put it in this perspective. The other thing with Yoda was that Yoda himself, as much as I love Yoda, the prequels really did hurt him as a character, because, he could have easily, the whole thing with the Shroud of the Dark Side, the whole thing of, there's not a Sith in the Senate, it can't be like that. Well, yeah, it's mostly because Yoda believed the Sith would just, do the old tradition of smash, 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 smash. So if you want to blame anybody in the Jedi Order, particularly for why the Sith amassed so much power they had, you kind of need to blame Yoda. That's kind of the thing, is that, the prequel universe in and of itself kind of really declawed Yoda, and, really kind of lost focus other than, oh, it's a green elf with a lightsaber, how cool is that? But still, you gotta remember this is the reason why he's so high on the list, is because, yeah, the prequel trilogy showed us, size matters not, and he was a clear, he was a firm example of that, and of course, without his training, where would Luke Skywalker be? Well, he'd probably be a stronger Jedi, and probably still have his hand if he stayed with him, but that's beside the point. it was through him that Luke truly started his path to becoming a much stronger Jedi that he is now. I mean, yeah, ObiWan helped, but, there was only so much time between him and Obi-Wan, so, who better to pass the torch than the guy who trained Obi-Wan? And several hundred Jedi in the past 800 years. Anyway, so, number 4, Yoda. Number 3, Jaina Solo. Jaina Solo, probably one of the best EU characters ever. Now, here she is, the daughter of Han and Leia, and the niece of Luke Skywalker. This girl was destined for greatness, but yet so much heartache. Here was a girl who, her twin brother became, a very powerful Sith, tried to restart the Sith Order, kind of succeeded in a way, lost so many of her friends, even had to kill her brother in a brutal duel, but yet she had to fight through all those emotions. Remember, Luke Skywalker, in the previous EU, Luke's, Luke allowed, some emotional contact, and, allowed Jedi to marry. A lot of, he more or less changed a lot of rules, and it kind of accentuated Jaina's power. Let's also not forget that she was, she learned how to fight and, learned some, survival skills from Boba Fett. Yeah, for those who don't know, Jaina was, took some training from not just other Jedi, but also her main, instructor was Boba Fett. Yeah. Just think about that. Your father's worst enemy trained you and kind of almost saw you as like a daughter in some cases. But yeah, that was the thing, is that, despite everything, she had a lot of faith in the Force. But yeah, there were times where she would question it, much like how Luke did in the previous trilogy, where it would be just so easier to give in to your hatred and, fight. She clearly saw her twin brother, fall into the dark side, but she had to fight through it. And through all the pain, yeah, she had to kill her own brother. It's not, it's kind of like with Luke, where he had to fight his own father, but he refused. No, Jaina had to kill her brother, or he was going to pretty much do a whole lot worse than, something the Empire could have ever done. And that kind of stuck with her. Oh my god, I just murdered my brother, and now how am I going to continue on? It's kind of another reason why I feel, as much as I like where they're going now with the new EU, I still feel bad that, Jaina's no longer in canon, but hey, we still got previous stories of her, so I guess that counts for something. And it's always kind of fun because, honestly, Jaina is the person I base. For those who don't know, I actually write some Star Wars Gravity Falls fanfiction, and in those cases, the story of Jason and Jaina Solo is kind of what I base Dipper and Mabel in that Star Wars Gravity Falls universe. So yeah, Mabel's very much like Jaina Solo in those stories, much like how Dipper is so much like Jason in those stories. But yeah, so yeah, she's so badass, I based a previous character off of her template. And yeah, you can't help but think that Jaina is a total badass. Someone who had to deal with so much family trauma, so much grief, but yet still came out on top as still this strong and very, very just well-in-tune Jedi, and as a warrior and as a woman. You can't help but respect that. So yeah. Of course Jaina was going to be on this list. But yeah, anyway, moving on to number 2. Number 2. Luke Skywalker. Yep. Luke Skywalker. Did you not expect him to be on this list? Yeah. The thing with Luke was that we really did connect with him in the prequels, was that here was a guy who had nothing in his life. He feared he was just going to stay on Tatooine all of his life, and that was going to be the end of that. But along comes Ben Kenobi, and he goes on an adventure, discovers he's Force sensitive, and it's all ups and downs from there. He is very much the definition of, meant for greatness. He is the archetype, young hero. And that's totally okay. Here was a guy who allowed himself to feel. He didn't, it's not like with the prequel Jedi who couldn't feel anything but just had to flow through the Force. No, here's a guy who allowed his emotions to cloud him, and yes, that did work against him, but other times his emotions saved him. In most cases, in the prequel, the original trilogy. And that was the thing. Luke was a guy we had to watch grow from someone who was kind of whiny and very, I wouldn't say he wasn't whiny in New Hope, but there were some times where you're just like, man, I hate this kid's going to be annoying. But then we saw throughout, the rest of New Hope and Empire, and then finally in Return of the Jedi he was always meant to be. And in the previous EU and the new EU, we see that he has become a true Jedi Master who is still, faced with so many obstacles in his life, even though he's grown older and much more wiser. So that's what I like about, I think, what more can I say about Luke Skywalker, honestly, other than, yeah, he is a totally awesome character. So yeah, this one's a little short, but yeah, it's Luke Skywalker. It's kind of like when I put Darth Vader on the list. What more can I say about Luke Skywalker that has been said already? Number 1. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yep, who else would it be, honestly? Obi-Wan was such a cool character, and yes, he's not like the other Jedi on here who have, questioned authority, or, had doubts in the Force, or even faced the dark side. Here's a guy who was a clear-cut Jedi, so why do I like him so much? Well, he is so much fun to watch. He's probably one of the good things of the prequels, one of the very few things. But here's a guy who faced so much and had to depend heavily on the Force to help guide him. Remember in Clone Wars where Maul killed Satine right in front of his face? Yeah, that messed him up. And he also was a very human Jedi. He did have doubts about the Force, but he still, he didn't, he had doubts about the Jedi Order, but he did have, he never doubted the power of the Force. Remember, him and Anakin were like best buds throughout Clone Wars and throughout Revenge of the Sith. We do see them kind of grow from, to be those good friends that, Obi-Wan from the original trilogy spoke so much about. The other thing is that even in the original trilogy, he showed up once, fought Darth Vader and died, but still we saw him throughout the original trilogy, him giving guidance to, to Luke. And that's what I liked about him, was that here was a guy who faced so much, and yet the Force that he believed so much more than in the Jedi Order itself, and it saved him in the end in a kind of way. So that's what I like about him. And also, this was a guy, it's kind of with Kit Fisto, is that he almost had this swashbuckling attitude to him in his youth. And that's what I like about him. Clear-cut, very, he was also a very human character. There were times where he almost gave into his anger, but he had to fight his own emotions, and it's not like with other Jedi where it's like, oh, emotions, whatever. Obi-Wan, it was very much like, man, I'm having the struggle here. But it's not as readable as Quinlan or someone else. But you do see that there were times where he kind of broke at some points. Remember, Obi-Wan's, he may be this badass Jedi, but yeah, he's still just a human being. He still has to feel. And yeah, he did take on the role of mentor to both Anakin and Luke, but he felt like he failed Luke. Man, when you think about it, there is a lot of failed apprentices to these Jedi. I mean, even Qui-Gon had a failed Padawan. I mean, yeah, Yoda had Dooku, Shakti had 3. Quinlan didn't have a failed apprentice. He had a dead one though. But yeah, you can see why the Jedi it's so easy to fall from grace, because the Jedi Order make it so easy to fall out of the light. So again, this is why this list was kind of hard, because Jedi kind of shot themselves in the foot. It's like, why so many people turn to the dark side? Oh yeah, because it's easier. You get to do shit. So yeah. Once again, so you guys tell me, who are your top 10 favorite Jedi? Just comment below, let me know. And once again, this is just my personal list. If you think a character should be higher or lower on the list, that's totally fine. No ill will against you. This is just my personal favorites, and I'm always excited to hear yours. So yeah, like I said, just comment below, let me know who are your top 10 favorite Jedi. And once again, hope you all enjoyed this list, and I will see you guys later.